very first thing, something to get used to if you are a little bit newer, logging into ITSO Real Estate. I'm just making my way to ITSORealEstate.ca, of course. But one thing that has changed a tiny bit, and you'll notice this straight away, is as soon as you log in for whether it's the first time for the day or perhaps you went inactive and you're just logging back in, what you will encounter is this dashboard concept. So even though I went to ITSORealEstate.ca, I haven't landed directly on the matrix system, where before you might have been used to that, but they did decide to go with a bit of a dashboard concept in between here. So this is where, since there are a lot more applications and accounts that members typically are making use of in their day-to-day, they did put this together so that there's, you're just kind of one click away from a range of different options here. Okay, yours might look a tiny bit different than mine, just there's going to be some administrative stuff here, but you will absolutely still see this dashboard concept when you go to ITSO Real Estate. Of course, just keep clicking here on ITSO Matrix, brings you straight over to the new matrix. Zoom in a little bit here, make it a little bit easier for everybody to see. And I mean, first thing, right? Once we, so for the agenda, as far as the direction for today's content, we're going to start by talking a little bit about the layout. Okay, yours is definitely going to look quite different than mine. I did this a little bit on purpose to really make the point of some of the changes that you can make to your dashboard. So we're going to be talking about that first. From there, we'll make some comparisons to the previous on-regional system, just off the front look, things to keep an eye out for. And then we'll kind of transition into a little bit of the settings, some first steps that you want to take on your account, making sure that things are kind of up to date and everything. Once we kind of conclude that with the settings, we will go into a little bit more of the approach that you want to have when you are running a search. So I'll show you kind of my way that I typically approach a search, just putting together a really good foundation so that you get the best results that you can. As soon as we have some results, of course, it's going to be everything on the other end of that, right? Customizing the listing display, talking about how you can change the look a little bit to make it more efficient for you. And then just when we conclude the things that have to do with searching, we will double back and actually, since we already have the background for searching, we will customize a hot sheet. And I'll talk a little bit more about this widget kind of when we get to that section. So, I mean, for the today's session, generally I'd say if I kind of block them, there'd be like really 3 or 4 main topics. First one here really being kind of the layout and getting into the settings. So let's start with that. Well, I mean, as I mentioned, right, this main screen here is going to look quite different than yours. Okay, and what I wanted to do here is before the session, I just kind of closed out all of the different widgets. So every single one of these little options that you have under additional here are all the available widgets that you have on your matrix dashboard. Okay, the only one that's kind of stuck there and pasted in place, of course, is always the news and alerts, which you'll see in the top left-hand corner. The rest of them, however, can be kind of moved around, interchanged. You could really make it look however you'd like. Kind of a way of doing that would be anything that you have inside of your additional list, you basically just kind of click and drag and drop them out of that section. So if I wanted my section on external links, let's say, right, to get to maybe the OMDREB website, if there was anything else I was going to check in my profile there, well, you just kind of drag and drop out of the additional section. Let me go ahead and maybe grab a couple that we'll end up using here. Let's see. Perhaps we'll use the search bar. I know for sure we're going to conclude on hot sheets, so we'll pull that one out. And the favorite searches we're going to talk about when we get into searches as well. Let me see. Is that good enough here? I think that's all we need so far. All right, so you could already see that even having dragged out a few of these, starting to look a lot more like what you most likely have showing for your dashboard. Just reorganize these a little bit. Let's go with that. Okay, but you really bear in mind that you really can make this screen as busy as you'd like. You can have all of these different widgets open if you make use of them all the time, or you could kind of simplify it, right? If you find one that you aren't using too often, um, don't be afraid to make a change here. Okay. As far as other aspects of the layout here, right? As I mentioned, we're going to be opening up the previous version of Matrix on regional.ca. I can get my spelling right here. Perfect. There's on regional. So I'm just going to be jumping in, logging into this one so that we can make just a couple of basic comparisons here, right? As you know, this one is kind of more stagnant data. We have moved over to the new system here. Let's see if I can get them side to side here. That's a little bit better. Perfect. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just a little bit of how this top bar has changed. So if you were quite used to the previous utilities that were on there, right? One of them being the home tab here, right? You'll notice that that is no longer there. Well, with this new kind of menu concept towards the top of the screen, they did refine it quite a bit, right? If I have a look side to side here and I'm just kind of glancing over all these menu options, well, previously there were something like 12 or 13 running across the top of this screen. It was previously a lot busier, right? If I make my way over to this right-hand side and I count them out, I think I'm at around 8, if I'm not mistaken, right? So they kind of made it as much as they can. They tried to make it a little bit more concise. They came to the conclusion here that most of what members were making use of and clicking on generally were inside of the My Matrix and the Search tab. So they spent a little bit of time kind of working on that, really refining the items that are in here to try and get the best user experience that they could. Another thing that has moved to a different location, and we're going to be jumping into that one in a few steps, is how you access your settings. So in the previous system here, if we have a look at My Matrix, for example, well, we used to hover My Matrix and there was a settings option kind of tucked away here in the top hand menu. This has moved over to just all the way to the right hand side here. If you go over to the kind of your name, in my case it just says hello Eric, the account that you're logged into. When you click, there is a bit of a drop down menu here, a little bit obscure at first, but it's there, and that is where they decided to tuck away the settings button. Okay, so we will be jumping in there in a couple of moments as well. Okay. As I mentioned, this home button is something that they decided to kind of drop off this list, but they did give us other ways to access that utility. Okay, so if I make my way over to any different screen, for example, right, I'm just going to click on residential search. Right, the use of the home button previously would have been, hey, I'm working on something. Maybe I just am looking to get back to that main screen with the widgets. Well, there was a home option before. You would kind of click on that, and here we are. We're kind of back where we started on that front dashboard. Well, how you would access that on the new system, 3 different ways to do it. First off, they actually built it into this logo. So whatever board or association that you're logged into on ITSORealEstate.ca. In my case here, we're seeing, of course, Oakville Milton District Real Estate Board. If you click on this, right now we're on that residential search screen. If we click on this logo, same exact thing, takes us right back to the home page. Okay. Second way of doing it is the My Matrix title. If I was to just click directly on it, okay, second way of doing it. And the third way is rather than just clicking on the My Matrix, if I hover it and then select dashboard, that third way would still get us right back to that main page. So you have this left-hand logo, the title My Matrix, or hovering My Matrix and clicking on dashboard. All 3 of them are still going to get you back to the same place, right? So if you're kind of in a search somewhere, you're just looking at some listings, but you want to make your way back, right? Just know you have a few options to choose from there, even though this home button has kind of migrated away and dropped off from the list a little bit. All right. So as far as getting into a little bit of those first steps in the settings that we're going to want to make some changes to. What I'm talking about more so with that is if I was so I'm just going to pull up a really random listing here, for example, right? We'll talk more about the search in a second, but just so that I can show you a little bit of a preview here, I'm just going to go to results. I'm going to click one of the very first ones that I see without putting too much kind of bearing on it. Just going to click on this one. Could be just about anywhere. It looks like it happened to be in Hamilton. Right, if I was to email this and just preview it, well, the part in the settings that we're going to talk about a little bit is, well, understanding that when we send any listing information from the Matrix system to a client, what it does is it creates a portal experience for them, right? Your client is going to be accessing that listing information, the details of the property, all that stuff gets sent to them in this view, right? A client portal. Well, if it's my first time logging into ITSO Real Estate, of course, there's some things here that we might want to tackle, right? I have not very many branding options relative to myself, my business, things that we want to make changes to, possibly a bit of an image that matches our branding up towards the top, right? That stuff kind of carries through the portal as well here. So that's one of the first things that we'll talk about, as well as where do we go for, updating our email signature. Perhaps we have something on regional and we're just looking to carry it over. Okay, so that's the part that we'll tackle in the settings first here. Okay, and as I mentioned, it's going to be over towards the right hand side, clicking on your name here and then clicking on settings. This screen as well is kind of one of my favorite ones to use to explain another concept here that has come into place with this new website. Is it is so much more user-friendly when it comes to a range of screens and devices that members are starting to use, right? So much more often now, I'll get a phone call of a member that's, at an open house, showing a client a listing right on a tablet or on a smartphone, right? They're accessing the system from a whole range of different devices. Well, have a look at this comparison really quick here. If I was to go into the My Matrix settings, for example, right? Well, even looking at this screen here, so you can make it a tiny bit smaller, right? Like what if this was the comparison of, definitely doesn't want to be friendly right now. There we go. What if this was, the look of maybe what a tablet would bring in, right? If you have a look here, well, it hasn't reacted in any way to the size of the screen, right? There's this massive dead space to the side. You might be familiar with this a little bit if you had previously been using the Matrix system on things like a smartphone or a different type of device, right? Like, have a look at this massive amount of information towards the side that I have to go track down if I just want to get to a tool section, for example. Well, that's something that has changed quite a lot. If I go full screen here, you'll notice that straight away it reacts, right? All my icons are stacked 3 by 3. If I make the screen smaller and I start to move to the side, it reacts immediately to any kind of change like that, right? Now we're comparing the two. There isn't some sort of scroll option towards the bottom here, right? It has centered everything to fit the screen. All the icons are now vertical and they have resized in a way to make it so much easier to look at on whatever device it is, right? Instead of having this silly screen running towards the side, you would have this button that you're more used to on a tablet, right? You could see your menu options open up. So this system was made to be so much more user-friendly across a range of devices. So bear that in mind while you're working on the different screens. That's a really, really huge improvement on kind of the overall feel and look of it. As we're getting into some of those settings, the ones that we're going to kind of tackle right now are in the My Information section. As I mentioned, more of the header and footer and the email signature. So I'll just open them up on both screens here so we can kind of make some comparisons. Right, it looks very, very similar. We're going to talk about the email signature first. This is one portion that's going to be a little bit easier for you to tackle once you are in front of a computer, right? If you happen to be watching this session on a tablet or smartphone or anything like that, maybe just kind of get a gauge for what I'm doing here. And then once you're in front of a computer, it's going to be a lot simpler to make the change. But I really am just kind of copying over some information that I previously had here, right? Which might be the case for some of you if you were previously using the on-regional system. Okay. So all I'm really looking to do is I do have a bit of a signature setup that's been put together already here. Really just going to come down to copying and pasting it over into my other tab here. Okay, so I'm just going to select it all. Okay. This part is kind of tough for me to show you. Because I'm using Google Chrome, it wants me to use the hotkeys on my keyboard. Okay, so it wants me to do Control-C and Control-V. Of course, if you're using an Apple device on Chrome, it might just kind of suggest that you use Command-C and Command-V. But it does want me to do it on the keyboard. So a little bit tough for me to show you. I don't have a camera on my keyboard or anything like that, but I really did just do the copy here, and then I pasted it over. And just like that, the information comes through, right? Once you're happy with it, you may resize it or make any minor changes. Really just comes down to hitting this save option towards the bottom here. Okay, perfect. That part's been updated. And just like that, we can move into the header and footer section. Okay, noticing really quickly here, same type of concept that I mentioned with the screen, how it resizes, right? We have this banner running side to side. If we make any changes, it really does kind of react straight away to whatever those changes may be. In the header and footer section, okay, so if you remember, for the client portal, this is when we're talking about maybe that banner and the branding that is kind of towards the top of the portal that your client is working within. This is a kind of a spot where you can either choose something that's just generated for you in the system, but however, you are also more than welcome to choose anything that you'd like for this image, right? The portal, in effect, is a private conversation between yourself and your client. So please feel free to be creative with this one. This is completely between you and your client. Okay. In order to choose your own image, however, you still have to navigate away from this option. It currently is telling me I choose not to use a header and footer at this time. All I have to do here is if I make any selection, doesn't matter which one it is, any selection, and then I hit preview, that's when it allows me to start manipulating it. Okay, so you still need to choose something, hit preview, and this next step is where all the changes happen, right? You'll see very quickly that in this banner image section, there is an option to upload a custom banner image, right? If you're looking to change this to your own branding, perhaps you have a photographer or someone that does some media work for you, or multimedia work, right? You would just kind of get the file from them, browse your computer, and once you track that one down, right, you would end up kind of finding the file, bringing it in. I've got for myself here, well, I mean, it will give you the suggested image size. I was going to say for myself, I don't have a one that's exactly 1600 by 120 pixels, right? So that would be this distance here because it's a really long image and it's not so high, 1600 by 120 pixels, right? Whoever is working on your images or if you're doing your own, well, you know kind of what size to kind of create there to fit the space. And then as soon as you upload that, you'll see it kind of come through straight away in the preview. Just because I don't have one that's sent through kind of at that exact size, what I'll do is I will go right back to that other screen. I'll just pull in a really simple one here. I think usually I've been going with this kind of couch look and hit the preview option. And you'll see same thing. It just kind of carries this header in straight away. And it does give you a bit of a default at things that kind of match the color scheme of the header as well, which is a little bit useful there. This one, I do get questions from time to time. Hey, when it comes to the information up here, like how do I get my phone number in there or any other information? I want my clients to be able to see my mobile number, for example, or whatever the case may be. Okay. Well, it might be a little obscure at first. It's right here, and it's just called the branding section. Okay, and it pulls information direct from your profile. Okay, so whatever information you have set that's going to be public, you can just come in here and pull these. You can put up to 5, right? So if I was to start adding them on, you'll see them come through. If I put my email, as well as maybe my office phone number, for example, right? I've got 3. You could see there's space for another 2 if I wanted more below here, but I think I'll just keep it simple and go with that. But that would be how you would start putting in some information for your client in that kind of portal header there. Okay. As far as working further down, normally I just leave this deactivated. It's just a print footer. If you wanted something to kind of conclude the bottom of the page, you can kind of add that in, but I was more concerned with updating to give our clients a little bit better, more professional and better presentation there when they're going in that portal and accessing the listings we send through. Just whenever you're finished with that, with those details, hitting the save option, and then you can always come back, and if you wanted to change up your colors or anything like that, you can kind of do a little bit of work on here. You see how it has given me some default ones. I just like to go with them because they're already kind of matching over with the rest of the color scheme that's going on. Okay, what we can do at this point as well is, because I mentioned the branding section, I want to show you really, really quickly where you're going to make changes to this, because that is actually one of the most common inquiries that I get is, hey, my mobile phone number seems out of date, right? How do I get my mobile phone number to update properly on Realtor.ca? Very, very common inquiry on the phone on that one. So if you go into your information section, right, you'll notice that everything is grayed out. You don't have access to kind of make any types of changes in here. And the reason for that is because the source of where this information is coming from is in fact your account on the OMDREB website. Okay, you have to go over there to change anything in this section. I'm just going to click on the logo here to get back to the home tab, and then I'll show you here, especially because we pulled over external links, right? Really good time to maybe just introduce that one. It's where you have a lot of kind of the different apps and options that are linked to your account, right? In this case, perhaps the members area, because I'm trying to get into the members area of my personal account here, right? May just ask me to log in with my OMID and password. You can see we are on the OMDREB.ca website. Okay, hopefully this does look familiar. I'll zoom in a little bit so everybody can see. Okay, you'll see here I'm just logged in as Eric Arand, so it's my profile here. And this, one of these first options towards the top, okay, my profile is in fact where you are going to be making any kind of change, right? If I wanted to change my mobile phone number, right, I can make that switch over here, right? You don't have to kind of call into the membership department or anything like that. Anything here that is available to you, you can change, right? The only stuff you can is if it's grayed out, right? If it's grayed out and you can't switch it, then you would just send a quick email through to our membership department with the request that you have. But things like mobile number, you can change that yourself. You just put in the switch here, and the part that's really important not to miss, okay, is right here below the mobile number section. Show mobile number on Realtor.ca. You must switch that to the letter Y if you want that information to be public. Whenever you put up a listing and it's shared through to Realtor.ca, this has to be a Y if you want that information to go through, and then anybody can contact you on that number that you've provided. Okay, I'm not going to add anything in. I'm not planning on having any active listings or anything like that, but just know that this is kind of the section where you would do that. You would put in your mobile number and switch this to yes. Okay, so I'll just close this up. Perfect. Okay, and maybe we will just have a really, really quick look here. Same thing as before. I mean, I'm just going to click very, very quickly, residential search, go to results, and we'll just have a really, really quick preview at a random property here. So we just pulled up a property here in Brantford, right? If we were going to email this out, well, we would notice straight away, one of the changes we made was adding a signature, right? I mean, if I was emailing this out, very straightforward, right? Just like any other email. We can see that now it has a signature attached, which is already a good start. And if we previewed it as well right away, like there's no delay in these settings changes, I could see that right, this has come through properly. If we sent this through to a client right now, they would have access to this branding information we chose. The image at this header section is carrying through to the next page, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so really just to kind of double check that we saved it properly and everything's looking good. Now we have a little bit of peace of mind when we go to email these listings and these portals out to our clients. But that's really the first step, right? Maybe a couple settings changes there, and then when it comes to reaching out to your clients, you're really kind of on the right foot there. With that, so kind of wraps up that really big first topic there on those starting stages and the settings. As I mentioned, we're going to be going into a little bit of how to approach searches on the new system here. The very first thing that I'll introduce as well is this search widget. Okay, and I find that this kind of, when it comes to the widget, right, making that decision, am I going to a residential search right now, or am I going to choose something like this widget? Well, the thing that's going to come into play here is you gotta, if you have information about the address, right? If you know directly exactly what you're looking for, well, then the best place to do that is this search widget. When you know the actual address. If you're looking for a general search that's going to be based on the criteria that you break down, then you'll go into the search dropdown and start kind of refining it until you find what you're looking for. Okay? But if you know the address, that's what this search widget is very, very good at, finding that kind of thing, right? If I was to do something like, I really should kind of test this before to double check, but I think let's go 55 Burness. We'll try to pick one. Perfect. Okay, so just searching, like this address is just one that's in the St. Catharines area, right? 55 Burness Drive. As you saw, when I put it into the search widget, however, kind of kept it as simplified as possible, right? And that was just because I did choose one that is quite unique, right? 55 is the street number, Burness is the street. If it was a really, really common street, right, I may have pulled in the city, right? I might have done St. Catharines or whatever the case may be, if it was something more like Main Street, because that'll happen just about everywhere, right? If I do 100 Main or 100 King, I'm much more likely to have a pretty ridiculous amount of results. And that all has to do with how much listing data that you have access to on this system. That's a really, really, one of the massive improvements in transitioning from on-regional to ITSORealEstate.ca is the fact that it was a combination of two massive MLS systems. Everything that was available through on-regional, when you would access any of the Ortus participating boards, right? Things like being able to search listings in Guelph, even though you're an OMDREB member, right? You would be able to see things in other cities in the area. And then we would previously go to our tools section, right? We may have hopped into ITSO Matrix, where we would have been accessing everything that's available to us on the Ontario Collective. Well, those two major systems, everything on regional and the Ontario Collective, were combined. And that's why you're seeing this massive amount of, right, I've got Sunridge, Seaforth, Mount Forest, right? I might not even know half of these cities, but you have access to so much more information, right? Because of even the Collective, right? Everything that was in the northern boards. Another one that may be more common for you is London, right? London, Ontario was previously part of the Collective. And that's something that right off the front search, you'd be able to find listings in London now without having to go into ITSO Matrix. Same with all those other northern boards. Okay, but when you're running this search, understand that any kind of search you run in the system, you're looking at the listing information from over 20 boards and associations. So that's where sometimes you have to be really specific, right? in this case, I can get away with it. 55 Burness is a very, very unique name. Happens to be probably only in St. Catharines that there is this street name. So in running this search, I would be expected to just get the historical data for a pretty particular property, right? We know that it's number 55 Burness Drive. Let's see here. Okay, once we get a little bit more into the search screen, when I talk about customizing list displays, that's this screen here, your member single line display. In this case, we have 6 of them, right? We're gonna go a little bit more in depth into approaching searches, and then we're gonna talk about how you can manipulate this screen a little bit, right? You can make your own changes. That's all something that we're gonna talk about in a couple moments as well. Okay, but again, anytime that you know the address of a property, it's going to save you a lot of time if you're running it within the search widget compared to try and breaking down the criteria and finding that property in a different way. Really, really helpful tool here, using the search on the widget when you know the exact details of the property. In looking at the new search dropdown as well, okay, really, really important to note that there has been a little bit of a separation between a couple of our fields here. Previously, when you would do a residential search, well, it included leases as well. That's something that in the new system has been separated out. So if I want to find leases, I do have to go into the lease section, right? I wouldn't go into residential and then put a check mark on lease. It's not going to give me any results. I have to go into the residential lease section. That's where they're going to be found. Okay, for the sake of just a really general, approach into the search, we will be working within the residential tab. So I'm just going to go search residential in this case. And hopefully you have had a little bit of time to kind of jump in, have a look at the information here. It is something that looks quite similar to the previous system, right? We have our status types. When it comes to information about the property type, right? Common interest should be things that look quite familiar from the previous on-regional system. Towards this right-hand side, we have our pricing information more in depth about specific features of the property. Okay, across the center is where we have a little bit of kind of how we can add quick changes to the map, everything that has to do with our region. Okay, and then one of the sections that might seem a little bit newer, because this is something that got added in, especially because of a lot of those northern boards and associations, well, they deal a lot with how much frontage is on a waterway, right? Well, because of that, they previously had options that had to do with waterfront, and it is a little bit of a tab that's been built in here. So now you can toggle directly, right, whether it is frontage on the water or not, and way more in depth about the body type, all that kind of stuff. Okay. When it comes to a search, however, okay, again, remembering, right, I've got 5,000 plus matches. Well, that's because, let's have a look at how large the span is here of the listing information. I could do that by going directly into the map. And you're going to see me do this quite often, actually. In this section on this residential search, I am going to be clicking between these 3 tabs: criteria, map, and results. Working between all 3 of them as we continue to make changes and have a look at how our matches are being affected by those changes. Okay, if I was to leave it completely open right now, so it's every active listing in the entire system, well, that'll happen if I just click on the map. I don't make any changes to the screen. I'd be able to see here that, for example, by zooming out, right, or checking a particular area, as we zoom in, you notice there was a little message there that was saying there's too many search results, right? Until we zoom in far enough, or we kind of hone in on a particular area, well, we could see how large the span really is here, right? You could see Kitchener, all that London information that has joined because of the collective, right? And the same case is going to be for these northern boards, right? We can also see all this listing information, kind of northern areas of Ontario as well, because of the collective in that case as well. Okay. So typically, the way that I approach the search, okay, I find that I'm a lot more of kind of like a visual learner, let's call it. So whenever I approach a search, there's a really, really specific thing that I do to set a really good foundation. And it actually, in my case, always stems from the map. So I'll give you a little bit of a tip here. Something that I like to do, right? As you noticed, when we went to the map there, it's quite hard to work with the map when it looks in this way, right? Perhaps I am looking for a particular area of Glen Abbey, and this is all I want to work with for this residential search. Well, working with an area when it's covered in pins can prove to be a little bit difficult. So what I end up doing is just temporarily, I will make sure that I have no results. Okay, and how I do that usually is just by putting a 0 on my price. If you zero out your price, you end up with 0 matches, as you can see in this bottom left-hand side. So what happens now is, well, I mean, down the road, I'm going to take this 0 away when we're ready to work with it. But for right now, if I zero out my results, I get this clean map that we could work from. No pins, right? No groupings. Everything is just available. You can see the map really, really well, and it gives me the option to start by actually working with some of the intricate tools that I have on the map itself. Okay, let's talk about these a little bit because these are the ones that we're going to use. And then we'll go back to the criteria and we'll take away this 0 once we've made use of some of those drawing tools. Okay, so I'm on criteria right now. I'm going to go right back to the map. We still have no results, which is what we're looking for. Okay, and let's just talk a little bit about some of these tools here. I'll go left to right, but INRIX Drive Time, I think, is the last one that I'll talk about. It's a little bit more of an interactive tool here. Very, very useful. It can be pretty cool to involve your client in a bit of a drive time creation here. We'll talk about that one last. Following that icon, we have a few types of drawing options. If you wanted to make a particular shape on the map that you're working from, you would start to use some of these drawing tools. You'll see I've got draw radius, rectangle, polygon, freehand polygon. Could also clear all the shapes if we have a bunch of them and we want to get rid of them. But if I was to make a selection here, right, draw radius, for example, right, could kind of select the draw radius, and then however I click and drag would start to become the sections that I either want to include or exclude on my map. Okay. When it comes to, you notice this little red dot that's available. Whenever you hover over this red dot, it happens to be for the circle, it's right in the radius. Okay. And when you hover, you can either include or exclude the particular shape. Right? If for any reason we wanted to get rid of that one, fighting a sneeze here. That was a close one. Okay. If for any reason you wanted to exclude a particular area, right? Whatever the reason may be, hey, you know what? Your client lived there last time. They're like, hey, as long as we're out of that area, we're looking for something, a little bit of a change of pace here, right? Cause an exclusion there. And then anything in that new zone is how our listings will react, right? I've got 0 out of 0 results right now. Even just keeping what I have on the screen, if we went to criteria and we removed the zeroed out price, we would start to see results. Well, we have almost 200 even in that small circle that we drew. If I go back to the map, you get an idea of how it affected it, right? Pardon me. Even looking at this shape that we excluded, right? What if perhaps we chose to include the shape instead? Pins would start to make their way into that section, right? Same thing's going to be true over here. If we exclude that other shape instead, the only thing we have left even is like a couple of listings here on that outer edge. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the criteria, put the 0 back, and we'll talk about this map a little bit more. So I'll just delete these shapes by hovering that red circle. Right, so that was the radius tool. The next three are also pretty straightforward in that sense, right? If I wanted to draw instead a rectangle, perhaps it's more of a polygon, right? If I wanted to follow particular blocks to make like a more specific shape or square or whatever the case may be. I know I'm really zoomed out here in this case, but right, if I wanted to try and follow along in a different sense here, can do that with the different drawing tools. And finally, we have the freehand polygon. So if you wanted to be more accurate with whatever you ended up kind of following the streets here, right, you would zoom in and kind of create it a little bit nicer there. But you have 4 different drawing tools that allow you to do that. And you can also kind of clear the shapes all at once with the clear all shapes option. Looks a little bit like a bit of an eraser there. One tool on this map that is going to be extremely useful, especially once you get into inputting listings on the MLS system, is right here, this layers icon. This one, I get phone calls all the time about a member will call up and say, hey, can you provide me with the neighborhoods in Burlington? Well, you have access to all that information. It's built right into your layers tool. Okay, if I was to click on layers, you'll notice that there are some boundaries that you can enable here, right? I can do the region, the municipality. The part that seems to be most members are asking about is neighborhoods. Well, if you're looking for the neighborhood that is set out by the particular board, of course, if I'm in Burlington right now, it would be RAB that created these boundaries. Well, you can track down those neighborhoods just by activating this, right? So this is a bit of a layer that's gone up over top of this map feature that we have right now, right? If I wanted to see what in fact is included in Glen Abbey and how does that differ from Westmount and West Oak Trails, well, it's going to be important to track this down so that you're, right, if you're looking for a very, very particular area, it could be shown quite differently when you're looking at postal codes or postal maps, remembering that these regions on the MLS system are set out by the boards. Okay, but you have access to quite a few. I believe all of the Ortis boards are in here, right? If I was to go look at the Niagara areas, it's all kind of broken down in this way, and you can get a really, really good visual here by just activating neighborhoods. Okay, it's right in your layers icon, activate neighborhoods, perfect. I can even keep that activated perhaps while I do a little bit of a drawing for a particular client, right? Maybe my client has asked me, yeah, well, the sections that they want, you kind of showed them what those were and how they were laid out. And by looking at this map, they decided that the shape they wanted was kind of like this, north of the QEW. I'm going to do a really quick one here, but still try and include 3 different neighborhoods, right? Now I've got Westmount, West Oak Trails, as well as a good portion of Glen Abbey. Okay, just with this quick kind of click here. And if you think about that, right, well, there are other boards and associations that are sharing information with us, right? We're shared information from RAB. We have an exclusive data swap with TREB, for example, right? If I'm trying to match up specifically these exact neighborhoods with the TREB ones, with the Hamilton ones, that's going to be a lot more difficult than just drawing something really quickly like this. Because this, it's like I took into account all 3 of those neighborhoods on all of the shared listings and boards and portions that you're a part of, because if it's true on the map, then we're getting that listing information, right? If we go into the criteria here and we take away the zeroed out price, we'll notice the listings pull through. Okay, and if I had a peek at that 3rd tab, the results, I'd be able to see some of those shared ones, right? I track down TW. This listing is a Toronto listing. XH, this is a Hamilton listing, right? For Toronto, right, look at this. We have Palermo West, right? Bronte Creek. We have TREB's version of West Oak Trails. Having a look even at this neighborhoods list, I'm starting to see possibly 6 to 8 different neighborhoods that I would have previously had to track down. All we did was draw this shape and it's brought them all in. Okay, what I mean by that is, right, think about if we did not choose to use the map and instead we went into the neighborhood section and we started to select the neighborhoods that our client wanted, like Glen Abbey, like West Oak Trails, right? Well, by the end of it, we're going to have to select quite a few in this list. It's going to prove to be quite difficult because we have to do all the TREB ones. We have to do all the Ordis ones. If there's any other shared boards that we need to track down, right, can prove to be quite difficult to do in this little space here or in even the list by kind of opening it up a little bit. Just understand that this drawing has taken all of that into account to save us all that effort, okay? If you use the map, it's going to be a lot more simplified in that sense. As long as the listing agent pinned it properly, you're going to be seeing all that information, and it is going to take into account kind of whatever neighborhood was chosen through those shared boards, okay? So having a look at this information now, however, we are going to have quite a big range as far as what's being pulled through. Okay, just before we start to refine it and kind of take this data to the next level, we're going to break it down eventually so that we could come up with some viable search results for a client, of course, the client that wanted West Oak Trails and Glen Abbey. But just before I do that, there was that last icon that I want to show you really quickly here. So when it comes to INRIX drive time, what is INRIX drive time? It's basically it's a drawing tool that will bring into account driving patterns and Google Analytics to kind of create a little bit of a shape on the map. The most common way that I find this one getting used is if you ask your client a particular question, like, hey, well, I mean, if you track down some information from your client, such as what they're expecting to have as a commute to work, for example, I find is a really common one. Well, if we open this up, as an example, I'll just use my, just the OMDREB office here. Right, if I put in 125 Navy Street, Oakville, just hit enter so it kind of tracks it down. And perhaps I want to be driving to this location by a particular time. Well, the board opens at 8:30. Maybe we'll just take 8:15 to keep it simple. Okay, and perhaps we're going with a 20-minute drive, and we're just going to use Monday as an example, a work day type of thing. Monday to Friday type of situation here. Well, if my client is telling me, hey, the maximum commute that I want to work for my 8:15 start is 20 minutes, right? As soon as I click add here, it's going to choose the center of this red dot is the actual location, 125 Navy Street. Okay, and what it's done is it's drawn by using those kind of Google Analytics and driving patterns. It's drawn a shape on the map, and you can see it here. It's a little bit tough for me to kind of get a good view on it here, but it's kind of gone from that region and told us how far we can understandably get, perhaps, in a 20-minute window, right? So it's saying if I was kind of north of the 407 and I was trying to get to work for 8:15, within 20 minutes, kind of towards the extremities would be the maximum of what I'd be able to pull off. But kind of letting me know that even what we chose in this area, probably a really good fit for this client, because it is going to include things that are going to be within that 20-minute drive, right? Even the ones on this top edge, probably going to be able to make it into work on time for that 8:15 start, right? So let me see here. I was actually going to delete the shape, but one more thing that I guess can come into play is you can do multiple INRIX drive times at once, right? If I wanted to create a second one, and let's say this was a couple, and maybe the other individual is looking to commute to an area in Burlington. Well, I would create a second INRIX drive time, just like how you're seeing these overlap. The two drawings would overlap and show me the portion where my client can ideally kind of track down a property. So if you think about that scenario, right, we're giving our clients a bit of an interactive tool. We're keeping them in the experience. Hey, well, both of your commutes, let's find the right area for you. It's kind of a way that you could be really personable with your client if you like that utility. Okay. When you make your way into this red dot, it also allows you to change the drive time info. So seeing this in the first place, right? This is probably you're able to get a lot further just with the general scenario. A lot of people working from home, perhaps there are some fewer cars on the road at this particular time, right? Take all that into account. If I was running this at this time last year in end of September on a Monday, the circle was probably a lot smaller, right? You probably couldn't get as far, but that's something we're seeing more and more cars on the road every kind of week as this goes on. But let's go to the change drive time info and make a really quick switch just to see how the driving pattern might react. We chose 8:15 for this one, still pretty early, but what if we chose something like 3:45 a.m., something totally unrealistic, just to see how it affects, right? If there's fewer cars on the road, I would expect the shape to get a little bit larger. Okay, perfect. So it really has kind of blown up and gotten a lot larger. As you can see, right, we were just on the extremities of this area, those neighborhoods. It has come out all the way into the Burlington area here and all the way even into Mississauga, saying that we can get there in 20 minutes. Well, all has to do with how it's pulling in those driving patterns and that information. So you can get an idea from that change that it's pulling in a difference there. Fewer cars on the road at 3 in the morning, larger availability to kind of what you can include in that commute. Okay, same thing is going to be the case if even for myself, I commute from kind of this east area of Hamilton. I find that when I search it, it's pretty accurate. My drive to work in the morning is probably more like 50 minutes, and it kind of balloons out to there. I believe if I change the drive time info and did the 8:15, let me see if it's still pretty accurate. I want to say 45 minutes should probably let me make it there. We'll find out. Perfect. So if I was leaving 45 minutes before work from this East Hamilton area, I should be able to get to work on time for 8:15 is what it's trying to let me know. Okay. But let's go ahead and I'm going to delete this shape. Please spend some time, jump into that utility, get a little familiar with INRIX. Again, it could be a really, really interactive way to set up an area between kind of what your client is and where your client is looking to kind of move and how it interacts with their commute to work. In this section, for the things that we are keeping, since we're going to keep kind of those 3 portions of those neighborhoods that we chose for our client, something that we're noticing right now is just even by hovering over some of these options, we have a pretty massive range. I've seen as low as 400,000. I've seen some properties that were over $2 million, right? Probably going to have to hone in on something a little more specific to our client's price range. Well, now that we have actually set out a location, that's when we're actually going to go back to our criteria. And as I mentioned, we're going to start to make some changes, right? The whole idea here was that the map was going to be that solid foundation for our search. And now that we've done that, well, we could work from the 76 matches that we have until we have something that's a little more relevant for our client. Okay, what we've avoided is getting lost in this regional section and choosing separate neighborhoods, right? The map is just so much easier to work with visually to construct a particular area to work from. Okay. So what we can do here is, I wonder, even just a price range, for example, right? Let's have a look at, wonder how many matches that's going to give me. That's way too few. What kind of range? Okay, so perhaps we'll choose this range for our client. And what we've chosen for this price range is, of course, just taking into account that these added zeros would mean that we're doing 1 million to 1.2 million. and it's broken down our results quite a lot, actually. Just for the sake of kind of time saving here, we chose just something. I know I had seen quite a few of these popping up, which is nice. 5 already, right? Probably a more manageable number when we're going to be sending properties to our client. Well, just like that, right? Properties in this region, we managed to track a few of them down. Okay, so we're down to the 5 results. And really, the only thing that we did, again, remember, we came in, we zeroed out our price, we drew out our shape on the map, we came back to criteria, took away the zeroed out price, and what you'll notice here is even for something in our client's requested area that's in their price range, we're already down to 5 matches. That's where there's a real importance here that you're taking your time to make few changes to your criteria as you work in between your map and your other tabs. So often I member will call up, I'll be speaking to them on the phone, and they're saying, hey, I selected a bunch of things in the residential section, I'm getting 0 search results, help, what in the world is going on? And then when we go in and we investigate a little bit further, there's like 15, 20 different things that have been checked off all these sections. They're trying to find a bungalow that has the perfect garage, all that kind of stuff. Don't fall into that trap, all right? It's going to be important that you are trying to stay as general as you can, break it down in like a really, like, you're going to need a bit of a strategy to track them down. I would not suggest going, active, house, attached, detached, freehold, right? If you get lost in just clicking every single one of the options that your client is looking for, you very quickly get to 0 matches. Okay, work with it, kind of work from that map, track down the listings, start to investigate further by looking at the details of the listing, right? You're going to have so much more success finding something for them in that way. Okay, in this case, we're just going to work with 5 of them because it's going to be a little bit easier to work from in this results section. But that's where we are going to go now, into that kind of customization of those listing displays. Okay. So if I go to the results section, what it's going to do is show us the 5 properties that we have on the map. It has turned out that, in fact, just the 5 that we have are kind of mostly shared listings as well. This one was put up on the ITSO Real Estate system, being that 400, starting with the numbers 400. Then we have a shared Hamilton listing and 3 shared Toronto listings that actually came through just in the case of this particular search. This screen here, okay, really important to note that you can manipulate this and change it up to some information that's going to be more relevant to you, okay? It's going to be really important. Let me go ahead and set mine as the default because it looks like it's not the base, okay? How you do that is this little gear icon, okay? Right, if you notice here, I'll take address and I'll drag it all the way to the side here. So it's kind of one of the first things that I have. Well, if I click on my gear icon and then I select reset to the system search defaults, that's what's going to kind of clear out the information if there was something on there that I wanted to change up. I just wanted to go back to the base, so mine looks a lot more like yours in this case. Now that I've done that, I just forgot to do it before the training session here. But I went back to the default now. So mine should look like yours, from MLS number, status, making our way over to city, things about bedroom and bath towards the right. Okay, get familiar with some of these different features. Of course, when you work from left to right, if we wanted to look at a bit of a preview of the photos of the property, where we ended up on the map, any kind of attached documents. So if there was some Schedule Bs or survey plans, anything like that that might have been included on the listing, they would show up on this left-hand side. We also have a section on history. Okay, if I was to click on a particular one here, hopefully we get lucky enough and it's filled out. Let's see what we can track down here. I was hoping to get one that's just totally filled out, but let's just go with that. So in some cases, right, if there was a lot of traction and this property has exchanged hands maybe 5 times in the last 10 years, for example, well, when you click on property history, you would be able to see at a glance all of those different changes. Okay, it kind of opens up this new tab to the side when you go and click on it. Okay. Then we make our way into the actual listing information, as we talked about, right? MLS number, all the way over to this left-hand side, we've got days on market, followed by kind of some other icons as well, right? Perhaps the showing time or the broker bay appointments, anything to do with open houses, a little bit of a geo warehouse option here, and the new market stats. Okay. What we'd like to do at this point for sure is, hey, perhaps this listing display is not exactly the most user-friendly, right? Where's the postal code? If maybe that's something that is coming into play for your search and you want some extra information on here when you go to either send it out to a client or the next time that you approach the search, that you want to see it a certain way, right? Maybe this days on market is quite important to you. Having it all the way towards the right is just kind of a little bit counterintuitive. Let's maybe bring it all the way over so it's right next to the price, for example. So you see the price, you see how long it's been on the market, and then start to kind of refine these a little bit, right? Maybe we want the address to move over to the side. As I mentioned, right, perhaps there are some missing ones here that we want to include for ourselves, like the postal code or even the neighborhood, right? If I was to make a selection here, what'll happen is you have a couple of ways to interact with these columns. The one that you've noticed me doing so far is just kind of clicking and dragging, much like if I was moving a widget on the front page, right? Kind of just make the selection and move it to the side when you see that crosshair show up. If I was to either insert or remove a column, how you would do that is by specifically clicking in this gray space. So before it was a click and a drag, if I was to just click right on that gray space, it opens up a little bit of a menu here. That's where you see insert column, remove column. Okay, I mentioned that perhaps we would want something like neighborhood. It works in the as a keyword search. So I just started typing the word here for neighborhood. And the first thing that's kind of come into play here is neighborhood / subdistrict. If I just click on apply after selecting it, well, we would see it pop in, right? It kind of came up right to this right-hand side of address. And now if I was looking at this view, right, I'd have my MLS number. However, wherever we want the price, we've got our days on market, the address, and the neighborhood, and so on and so forth. Well, what'll happen here, and the most crucial thing that you're going to have to make a change to, is if this is the new listing display that you would like to have, you need to set that as the new starting default. Okay, if you remember that gear icon that I selected at the start when I was just resetting mine, when you click on this, it gives you two options. You can either set the current display sort order count per page as my search starting default, or reset to the system search defaults. Well, in this case, since we want to update it to what we've now created, we're going to choose that first option. Set as my search starting default. Click on that option. Your search defaults have been set. What this means is if I navigate out of here and I go back to the dashboard for any reason, and then I go in and I run a brand new residential search, right? This is not the search that we had before. This is one that has the entire open system. If I go to results, well, you'll notice it's still current price, days on market, address, neighborhood. It's only like that because we set the new search starting default. If you don't click this, it'll always just result back to the default. Okay, you must do this manually after you make the changes that you'd like. Okay, I'm actually just going to click on my recent searches at this time to go back to the one that we had. If you remember, it had 5 results. Not to be overlooked as well. You have a recent searches section, just choose that one. And just like that, we're right back on our 5 results. Okay, your recent searches will keep, I think, up to like 50 in this area, and you can even go to view all to see more of them. Okay. So as far as this listing area, right? Something that we may want to do, even though it has gone into our recent searches, well, now that we've customized this result, this listing display, something that we may want to do, right? Perhaps I'm not ready to just email particular listings to my client at this time. Maybe I just wanted to put some work in on this and say, you know what, maybe I'll come back to this tomorrow or this afternoon, right? If anything comes up, well, I'm probably going to want to save this information. Okay, how you would do that, there is a little bit of a save option in these action buttons here. If you click on save, okay, you have new saved search, new auto email, or a new speed bar shortcut. Well, in this case, if we're just looking to make a simple saved search, we're going to click on that now, new saved search. Choose a little bit of a name for this. So listings, what do we want to call this? Based on listings in, okay, I'm going to just name it something silly so that I have an idea of the client that it's for and how we broke it down. So it's in specific neighborhoods, right? It's neighborhoods that Brian had chosen. I'm just going to use Brian, he's our IT manager. And this will be the kind of the name of our search here. If I wanted to assign this to a particular client, right, that's for kind of your own organization. Feel free to kind of make a selection there if you'd like, but you can leave that blank. Another thing as well, okay, and this is going to be the really, really important part of a saved search, okay? There's a little checkbox that you can select here that's described as enabling as a favorite search on the home tab. Okay, you can have a maximum of 10 of these. I'll show you what this does. This is a really, really interesting feature I find. Okay, it can be extremely, extremely useful if you are making use of saved searches. And this feature is something that's only available when you favorite the search. I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm just going to leave the contact blank. We named it, right? And all it is doing with the saved search that we're making, you saw mine is extremely simplified. We made a particular drawing on the map and we chose a particular price range. That's just about everything that we did, right? Residential, active, this is the drawing, and this is the price range. Just hit save in this case, right? If we wanted now, perhaps 4 hours from now or 2 days from now even, when we go to run that search, well, we'd be able to kind of pull it up really, really quickly here. Okay, because it's right here in our, first off, we checked it off as a favorite search and we can see listings in neighborhoods for Brian. I know it was a really silly name there. The other place that we can find it is in our My Matrix, we have a saved searches section. Okay, if I went in there, for example, I'll be able to see the entire list of saved searches that I've got so far. Where am I going to track this one down? Let's see. Listings in neighborhoods for Brian. We would see that we kind of created that one today as well. We can kind of refine it or change it up however we wanted. If at any point we want to run that search, we could just hop in here and click and kind of go to the results, for example, and we'd be right back to those 5. As I mentioned, there was a really, really cool feature that comes into play if you check that box to save it as a favorited search. Okay, that's something that only happens over here on the widget, right? Remembering that you pull your widgets out of the additional tab. This one's called My Favorite Searches. If you drag that one out, just in case you may have that one closed out, bring that one over to any portion of your screen here. What it allows you to do, okay, and this is going to be unique to only the My Favorite Searches section. You can see I've got 5 of them here. Well, what happens is you have an Update All button. This is the only place where you have this button. If I click on this, what it'll do is it will give me a distinction here of exactly the properties that I have never had a chance to look at. Okay. if I look at my previous searches here that are saved, well, perhaps map search 400 to 500 for any reason. I'm not sure when I created this one, but if I clicked on it, right, we would notice that there are 12 different results. Well, it turns out that however long ago it was that I created that one, right, I can either look at the entire amount of the search, or I can click on just the 11 new ones. If I click on 11 new, it's only going to give me those new ones. So it looks like my previous search might have just had one result. And now that, because I have the ability to look at it as a favorited search with the update button, I could look at only the new ones if I'd like, right? This properties for Brian September 15th, for example. I could look at the 5 new ones, or we could look at the 8 perhaps that were there. Okay, these searches, of course, are going to be a little bit drawn out because they're going to be some older ones here that I haven't looked at, or whatever the case may be. But understanding that the update all option, that could be something really useful, right? Perhaps I created a particular search, right? And we run this, and because it has 5, right now I could see the 5 that are there. Of course, we're going to spend some more time jumping into the individual listings, going back, kind of working between them, having a closer look, seeing if they work for the client. But perhaps 2 days from now, maybe I'm going to want a little bit of an update of, hey, which ones are in fact different, right? Maybe 2 days from now, instead of 5, there's actually 7 listings. Well, how am I going to differentiate those 2 brand new ones? Since it's a favorited search, that's part of the utility is going to show me that new information. Okay, so I find that one, it can be quite useful. Okay, only available on a favorited search though. Okay, if for any reason, right, perhaps you had saved yours as a normal saved search and it's just in your big list of saved searches, you can always manage your favorited ones as well. As I mentioned, you can have up to 10. Right, but if I went into Brian, looks like I use Brian as an example for a lot of training sessions, but Brian's new search for 125 Navy, I don't think was inside of my favorited searches, right? I just don't remember seeing that one out of the 5. Well, if I go down into the settings, right, I have the option of converting this one to a favorited search. So even if it is a previous one that you were using, you can always just activate that. And moving forward, you'll be able to make use of that new feature because of the update all. Okay, you can kind of throw that on at any time. I'm just going to hit cancel here. Perfect. So with that, we ended up kind of saving the search, getting some options that we're going to work from it perhaps in a couple days when we reapproach it or get some more information from our client, right? At this point, maybe we're just putting some groundwork down to save us some time, and it's something that we're planning on continuing to add to that project a few days from now, of course. Right? When it comes to approaching a search, remembering that the part that's going to be important is that you set up a really good direction and a goal for yourself, right? As I mentioned, the way that I like to do that is always to do with the map. So whenever I approach the search, you won't see me jumping in and selecting criteria first. Always end up zeroing out my price, drawing out where I'm looking to work in the particular area, right? And then I go back to my criteria, and right away we'd be working with 46 matches, breaking it down one piece of criteria at a time until we meet what our client is looking for. Okay, I find that that's probably the most effective way, the easiest way to kind of get started, and then you're not getting confused between the differences of the, it's really easy to get hung up on the neighborhood names, especially with shared boards. So I find that to be the easiest way there. With where we're at in the content for today, as I mentioned, that final piece that we're going to bring into play right now is talking about the concept of a hot sheet. All right, so same thing as before. If you don't have hot sheet on your screen, perhaps it is closed out and you just have to drag it over from your additional tab. So I'll bring that one to the front screen here. Yours should look pretty similar to mine, as the hot sheet right now is it's just kind of placeholders here that have general open searches for all of the property types. That we're definitely going to make some changes to. The way that you would end up using a hot sheet is I find it really, really useful as a way to stay on top of the market in more of a general sense, right? Perhaps I'm looking for something specific that's in my trading area, right? That's going to apply to maybe a range of my different clients that I typically work with. Well, you can come up with a really, really good hot sheet that's going to allow you to search that perhaps every day or every few days. You'll notice here that hot sheets are based on timely searches, right? I could switch this to be things that have happened in the last 7 days, perhaps even just the last 24 hours, or as close as, you know, this exact session that we're on, or even only new ones since the last time we ran the search. Well, that's going to give you some time-based utilities here that really let you manipulate what you're looking at in the market, okay? The thing with a hot sheet, however, and the most important part is you have to refine the criteria, or else it's just, you have to come up with a really, really good customization of the criteria, or else it's just not showing you anything relevant. And how you do that is all within this customize menu. Okay. If I was to just show you an example, right, remember that when you search on the system, it's searching the entire open system of over 20 boards and associations. If I just click on residential, even in 24 hours, the number is going to be quite high. There's almost 2,000 listings that hold that status of being things that happen in the last 24 hours. Okay, so bear that in mind. The reason for that, well, it's every single city. Nottawa, Oakville, Ancaster, Peterborough. It's all of those different portions of those 20 boards and associations. Okay, I just kind of went to the city section for that. Okay, so we need to refine that, right? I'm probably not going to be selling a property in Nottawa. So just throw that out there. Going to need to refine that a little bit to meet my business goals. Okay. Going into the customize menu here, you'll notice that it kind of takes you over to a section where you're able to manipulate your hot sheet a little bit better. Right? If I wanted to just change a little bit about this residential one, and perhaps I'm going to rename it, and then I'll follow it up by editing the criteria. Right? As I mentioned, the hot sheet's only as good as the customization that you give it. So in this case, honestly, what I end up doing is, because these are only placeholders and they're just open system, I end up getting rid of them completely at first. Okay, so I just kind of hit delete on them one at a time. Just really like working from scratch here. If you ever want that list back, you could just click Restore System Defaults. The whole list will come right back if you do it that way. Okay, but I'm going to delete them. Starting from a clean slate, I think, is the easiest way to approach a hot sheet. So I just got rid of all of them, and the only thing left now is an Add button. I'm going to go ahead and add it on. Another thing that I mentioned here, and just to give you that information, we're actually going to work from across property. Okay. In the simplest terms, the only thing that a cross property is doing is it's allowing you to choose more than one property type. Meaning, if I was looking at both farm and land, I would choose cross property. And I'll show you how it kind of allows me to do that. That's on the next step. Okay. But the rest of them are individual, just like how we ran a search residential. Well, the only things we could look at was residential. We wouldn't be getting any multi-residential duplexes, fourplexes. Well, perhaps just in this example of this hot sheet, maybe I will open it up a little bit. New residential and multi-residential in Milton, perhaps. Okay. So quick title there, chose cross property, and then we'll hit save. So again, if we were to just go and hit done and go to this one, well, it's searching the entire open system. We absolutely still need to edit this criteria, or else it's not doing anything for us. So let's look at that edit criteria screen. Well, by just going into this, it's going to look almost identical to our search dropdowns, right? We're refining this. We're specifically refining a hot sheet, which is in the cross property section. Okay, and cross property, all it has done is it's given us this section here called property type. This is the way that you're able to choose more than one at a time. Okay, if I wanted, right, perhaps some of my clients are a little bit more open about their search, and they'll, perhaps I do deal with like duplexes, fourplexes, other types of residential structures that might go a little bit beyond just a house, let's say, right? Well, in that case, I'll broaden this up. Cross property will allow me to do that. Okay, and we can get more specific later on down the road if we wanted, for example. Okay, in this case, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're just going to go with new listings that are residential and multi-residential. We also mentioned that it's going to be in Milton. So I'll probably just jump into the city section and specify Milton in that case, right? If we wanted, right, could refine it a little bit differently. Maybe we do Halton and choose the municipality. I'm just going to simplify it here and select the city Milton in this case. And even just like that, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 particular, criteria that we've chosen. I'm not even going to refine price or anything like that. I just want to see the market, how new things come into play in this area of Milton. And we'll just hit save. Okay, now we've customized the hot sheet. That's when it's actually going to start giving us some results now. Okay, if I run this for a 24-hour search, well, when I click on new residential, multi-residential for 24 hours, it gives me a list of things that meet that criteria, right? It must be new. It can be residential or multi-residential. And it's time-stamped. Yesterday's date plus 24 hours, which takes us all the way to today. Looks like we're at about 2:25 p.m. in this case. Okay, so that's how the hot sheet is kind of working here. Now picture what we've created, right? Perhaps at maybe that's something that I'm going to run again tomorrow at about 2:30 in the afternoon. Maybe I'm having like a late lunch or that kind of thing. I know what I was looking at to stay on top of the market here in Milton. Tomorrow, when I click on it, I'm going to keep this 24-hour range, and instead of seeing everything that happened between yesterday afternoon and today, it would give me that following day of information, and then we can just see the new criteria that's come into play. So again, really just a way of gauging the market in the area that you're selling or trading in. Okay, and now that you know how to do it, can be quite quick to kind of add one in, right? This is something that'll always be here. I can even do it in 2 weeks from now. But if I was going into customize, for example, and I wanted to add one on, well, perhaps I'll keep it as cross property. And I'll separate out Oakville. We have Milton and we also have Oakville. Okay, we're definitely going to have to edit this criteria, or it's just open system. New listing, residential, multi-residential. Now we put Oakville, we hit save. Just like that, the two of them have those 4 search criterias. Just hit done, and I can quickly differentiate between one and the other. I can save, just hold that same timestamp. Well, it looks like the Oakville one, City Oakville, and all of that criteria, there's about twice as many listings just in this particular area, for example. And I could see that at a glance, and I could start to kind of investigate a little bit further what has happened on the market in the last 24 hours. Okay, perhaps as my own strategy, maybe this is part of my routine in the morning. At like 6:30 or 7 in the morning or whatever the case may be, I'm having a morning coffee, just want to see those new things that happen. Well, maybe I always leave this to 24 hours and I just have a quick peek in here. That's my way of staying on top of the market, right? You can kind of start to create some really effective ones in your hot sheets. Maybe you're going to create some hot sheets for your leases, some hot sheets for your condominium if you're getting into that type of trade, right? Well, you start to make these individual hot sheets and you gauge the market based on a time frame. Right? I'm away for a few days, I'll run it for 3 days. The next day I'll bring it back to 24 hours. Right? Just staying on top of kind of what's going on there. But now that you understand how to kind of break down search criteria, you may be able to come up with a strategy and make some effective hot sheets that are going to really work in your favor.